grow into a movement, but I think it does need a little bit of nurturing and watering on the part of the United States.
It can't just be words. It can't just be the press conferences and statements. It can't be Black Lives Matter coming out with a statement that pits the minorities against each other in America, where it's a fight over white supremacy on much of the platform.
I mean, let's make no mistake. Black Lives Matter, always have, always will. But that statement was just, I called it ignorant, myopic, and unproductive. I happen to agree. I think the proof's in the pudding, in the ineffectiveness of the embargo. And I think that that's a long-term strategy. I think if the embargo had ended decades ago, we'd be much closer to a free Cuba than we are right now. The idea that people say, well, this was the purpose of the embargo. The motivation was to create dissent and to get the people to rise up. Well, it's taken 60 years, and how many people have died and are suffering in misery not because of the embargo, but because we've done nothing different to help change the fates of the people there.
And the normalization of relations that took place a few years ago led to tourist dollars that have now, by a pandemic, been taken away. So they got a breath of life from some commerce in a land that you can speak to just how stuck in the 1950s that entire economy is. And then the pandemic took it away, right? There's no tour. You can't get tourism in Cuba now. You can't. They lost those dollars. And one of the reasons the hardliners were saying you do not at all stop suffocating that country is because they don't trust that the money will go to the people. They think the money's going to go to just the crime family.
Well, make no mistake, the regime will steal as much as they possibly can, be it supplies, be it medicine, be it food, be it dollars. They always will. I'm not a big believer in Cuba travel, in hipster Cuba travel for the gram. I'd love to see Cuba. My grandparents, 93 years old, talk about Cuba before the revolution as the most beautiful place they'd ever seen. Mind you, it was still effectively under a military coup under Batista at that time, but it was, there was commerce. It was free and open in so much that there was capitalism. You can be a totalitarian or a military dictator and also, waving the banner of capitalism the same as you can with communism. But
it's what Miami would become, right? It's talked about in the 1950s as what Miami would become for the United States, a place, an exotic, fun, different, brown place that we could romanticize about the nightclubs and the partying and the rum.
It's what Miami is. I mean, honestly, Cuban culture or Miami culture is effectively Cuban culture with hip hop, thrown in. Because without Cuban culture, Miami wouldn't have no culture, but it would just be another southern town, right? Which would basically be African American culture, which is by and large effectively American culture, and then meth. I guess white people would bring something to the table, hamburgers and hot dogs.
And that's the part I wanted to share. I was listening to that interview, and I had to stop because here's a film director, and he said that flat out. Like, he could have said, "Oh, American culture is Native American culture," but he said no. He said African American culture is American culture. And you see, he even caught himself to make sure he corrected how he said it too. He didn't say it was United States culture. He said it was American culture. And that makes me wonder if he knows more. And at the same time, I'm kind of frustrated when I listen to stuff like this because, the word Miami, is the name of an Indian tribe from Ohio. That the word Miami means water, and it's like as you're listening to that, Cuba, Miami, Cuba, Miami, Cuba, Miami. It's like the Miami is being hijacked. Its culture should be made. It should be an American Indian culture. It should you should know that for being Miami, instead of Cubans. And it's by design because look at the laws they have set up for the Cubans. Cubans get 1 foot on the land. You get to stay here. If you're Haitian, got to go back. If you're Jamaican, got to go back. Well, what does the Jamaican and the Haitian have in common that the Cuban doesn't have in common? Well, the majority of Cubans don't have in common, I would say. Just look at him. Look at the guy that's this Billy Corben claims that he's a descendant of Cubans that came there. The guy giving the interview, Dan Le Batard. Le Batard is French, but he claims he's Cuban. Dad and mom, escaped Cuba, escaped Castro. So you can see why they would let one stay and the others they say, hey, go back. But I just found that interesting right off the bat, just who this person is, what he does for a profession, and the way he clarified and caught himself to state, African American culture is American culture. When he should have said, if he was being democratically, politically correct, it would have been, Native American culture is American culture. See? So.
Is effectively Cuban culture with hip hop, thrown in. Because without Cuban culture, Miami wouldn't have no culture, but it would just be another southern town, right? Which would basically be African American culture, which is by and large effectively American culture, and then meth. I guess white people would bring something to the table. Hamburger.